Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another week of championship predictions. For the regular watchers, guys, I just want to say a massive apology that I couldn't get out the midweek predictions purely just because I was on holiday over the weekend, and by the time I got back I just didn't have time to get those ones out. But I am back for these weekend predictions, so let's get straight into them. And we start off with Preston, who take on QPR. And look, I don't know what's happened to Preston, but they are in some terrible, terrible form at the moment. Dropped down as far as 8th in the table. At one point, they were leading in the table early on in the season. And a big 4-0 defeat to Middlesbrough. What's really out of character for Preston is the fact of how many goals they're conceding. It's now 30 goals that they've conceded this season. And that's really uncharacteristic for Preston. You know, usually they're quite tight-knit games. And at the start of the season, they kind of changed that by scoring a lot. But now they've kind of changed it in a negative way, that they're conceding a lot. Take on a QPR team who are having a bit of a change themselves. Finally, new manager, and they've finally got that much needed win. Of course, they've still got a lot of work to do. They still remain 6 points off safety thanks to the result that Huddersfield managed to get. But things are starting to look up for QPR, especially under their new manager. And they've got potential here to pull off an upset. I really do think so. But I'm going to narrowly back the home team. I'm going to stick with narrowly backing Preston. I'm going to go 2-1. But it wouldn't surprise me if QPR got something out of this. Let's move on to next, talking about West Brom, who take on Leicester. And a West Brom team who, well, are performing very well. In fact, they've won 4 of the last 5. And they just continue to keep climbing up the table, really. And they've got a huge opportunity against the Leicester team, who we massively disappointed. I've, not long watched the Wednesday games come in. Of course, this is coming out on Thursday, but I'm recording it on a Wednesday night. And Sheffield United getting Sheffield United, what am I about? Guys, let's move on to speak about West Brom next, who take on Leicester. And this is going to be an interesting game because Leicester are not in good form. They only managed to get a draw against Sheffield Wednesday. And a fair play to Sheffield Wednesday firstly getting the result, but it's not a result that you would have predicted. And in fact, they've only actually won 1 in the last 4. So are the wheels starting to turn off for Leicester City? The pressure is kind of starting to mount on them. The rest of the table are getting closer. And one of those teams that are getting closer to them is West Brom, who have a huge opportunity this weekend. They've been in some good form. They've won 4 of the last 5. And they're really starting to look like a good, solid team and a good, solid pick for a team that should make the playoffs. Of course, they won't just be doing themselves a favour if they do manage to beat Leicester. Of course, they will be doing the rest of the league a favour as well, because those particularly near the top are starting to close the gap on them with Leicester's bad form. It's one to watch out for. I think West Brom will get something in this. I'm going to go for 1-1 in this fixture. Let's move on. Speak about the team that I just mentioned in talking about Leicester. And fair play to Sheffield Wednesday. Managed to get that big result against Leicester, but they're going to need a few more. They're a massive 12 points off safety. And the take on a Blackburn team, for me, I think are just sadly going to have, if you're a Sheffield Wednesday fan, are going to have too much goals in them. Smodics continues to be the top championship goal scorer this season. He managed to bag another 2 midweek, and he's actually managed to score 0.78 goals per 90 minutes he's played this season, which just shows on what great goal scoring form he's on. And I think they're just going to have too much in terms of goals. So I'm going to get Sheffield Wednesday to have a goal, but I think Blackburn win this. I'm going to go Sheffield Wednesday 1, Blackburn 3. Let's move on swiftly to Saints, who take on Cardiff next. And of course, this is a Saints team who are, another team really picking up some form. They're now up to 4th. They're unbeaten in a massive 10 games. So that really does mean that Cardiff have got a huge ask, especially away from home at the weekend. Cardiff, of course, are a good team, and I've said this before, they're doing a lot better than I thought they would have done this season. They're currently sitting in a nice, respectable 9th position. It does offer them a really good opportunity to maybe take some points from Saints this weekend. And of course, just kind of maybe close that gap on the top 6 that they will be wanting to search for, obviously not being a million miles off it. But sadly, I do think Saints will continue their unbeaten record, and I do think they'll go better than that and actually get a win. So I'm going to go Saints 2, Cardiff 0. Guys, if you are enjoying the video, can I please just ask you before I speak about this next fixture to hit that like button, and please do subscribe to the channel if you've not done so already. And of course, drop your predictions in the comments below as well. Let's move on to Plymouth now, who take on Stoke. And an interesting stat for you when it comes to Plymouth, 1.76 points per game at home. You compare that to their away form of just 0.33. You really do see that this is a team that have a good opportunity of get something against this Stoke team, where I've been saying it nearly every week, where I just think I keep saying this Stoke team keeps underachieving. And although I kind of think that's still true, at some point I can't, continue to say that. At some point it's got to be the fact that Stoke are not doing well and perhaps aren't as good as maybe I thought they were on paper. I think it's going to be a tough game for Stoke because, as I mentioned, Plymouth's home record is very good. And I find it hard to not back Plymouth, especially when they are at home, especially against a team not in fantastic form. So I'm going to go Plymouth 1, Stoke 0 in this one. Let's move on to a team who's in fine form, and that is Ipswich, who take on Coventry. And of course, Coventry are, they're improving their form a little. They've won the last 2, up to 15th, and are 3 unbeaten. But it's going to be a really hard ask to get anything against this Ipswich team, who really do look like just a real complete outfit. And of course, have the added motivation of the fact that Leicester once again dropped points. And of course, if Leicester dropped points at the weekend, Ipswich managed to get a win. I think I'm right in saying that would put Ipswich at top of the summit, top of the table. I think that's going to give them some real added motivation. So I'm going to back Ipswich in this one and go Ipswich 3, Coventry 1. Let's move on to Blues next, who take on Rotherham. And of course, Blues did manage to get a victory, not just the game just gone. Of course, they lost to Blackburn, but they managed to get one at last weekend. They managed to beat one of the relegation teams in Sheffield Wednesday, and they've got another chance against a relegation team who are on a bit of a weird dismay at the moment. The chairman basically saying that he hasn't. I think he pretty much said he hasn't chosen a new manager yet because he's been on holiday, which. It really just does say it all, but this really does give Rooney an opportunity to go and get some more points and take a little bit of pressure off him. One thing I would say for Wayne Rooney is the fact that at least Birmingham are scoring. If you wanted to look for a positive, in the last 5 games, has scored in every one of those games. So he's scoring, but unfortunately he's just conceding too many. But I think with Birmingham, and they have been scoring, I think that will be enough, especially at home. So I'm going to go a 2-0 win to Blues. Let's move on to speak about Swansea now, who take on Huddersfield. And do you know what? The one thing that was really shocking me when I was looking into these two teams, looking at the highlights, etc., was the fact that there's only 1 point separating these two. Now, I know that Huddersfield got a good result over the midweek fixtures, of course, but that just surprised me. I really did think there was a bigger gap between these 2 points, and it does really matter of teams, and it maybe does show that Swansea just really haven't been performing well this season. I don't think there's going to be a massive thing to separate these two. Of course, as I mentioned, there's only 1 point between them in the league. It could honestly go either way. So I'm going to call it down the middle. I'm going to go Swansea 1, Huddersfield Town 1. Let's move on to Millwall next, who take on Sunderland. And guys, a really interesting stat for you here when it comes to Millwall and Sunderland. Millwall this season have only achieved 0.78 points per game at home. Now, maybe that doesn't seem that bad, but let me give this in some context of how much usually the Den is such a fair place to go. 22-23 season, they achieved 1.7 points per game. You go back another season, 21-22 season, 1.96 points per game. So the home form has really dropped off compared to what it is usually. And I think obviously, as we can see, the team as a whole has dropped off. But oddly, their away form is actually better than their home form at the moment, which is just something you don't usually see with Millwall. But they maybe have a little bit of a chance to change it because, of course, Sunderland haven't been on the best run after the break. They've lost both of their games, but they'll be wanting to try and rectify that. I think they will have a bit too much for Millwall. And, the Den at the moment doesn't seem that intimidating place it has been in recent seasons. So I'm going to go Millwall 0, Sunderland 2. Let's move on to speak about Leeds next, who take on Middlesbrough, and this feels like it could be a bit of a tasty game, especially now Middlesbrough have picked up their form. Of course, a massive win against Preston, a big 4-0 win, and they continue to climb the table. And I think they'll probably go into this game wanting to put with some confidence and really wanting to put some pressure on this Leeds team. But Leeds will have their eye looking even further up the table. Of course, Leicester dropping points again, and their midweek win did rectify their odd shock resort by only getting a draw against Rotherham. They managed to beat Swansea midweek. They look impressive, and this one could have the potential for goals. I think there will be goals in this one. I'm going to go for a bit of a mad scoreline. I'm going to go Leeds 3, Middlesbrough 2. Let's move on to speak about Hull next, who take on Watford. And obviously, I've been bigging up Hull all the way through this season. And it looks like my prediction that they will keep picking up and keep getting better seems to come into fruition. They're, of course, now sitting in the playoffs. They look like a really good team. And I think they will just continue to get better and better as the season progresses. I don't really see them dropping out of the playoffs either, to be honest. I think, if anything, they're just going to continue to put pressure on those above them. And I expect them to get the win against Watford. Watford obviously haven't been on a terrible run of form, especially since sticking by the manager. But I think Hull will have too much. I'm going to go Hull 2, Watford now. And guys, I think, have we got two more? No, this is the last one. It's Bristol City who take on Norwich to finish off the predictions this week. I think this one's got goals in it as well. I think this is another game that could potentially have goals in it. I think both teams will have really good attacking players. Both teams will give each other a real go. This could go either way. I'm going to call it as a draw. I'm going to go high scoring draw to finish us off, guys. 2-2 in this one. Guys, thank you for watching the predictions. If you have enjoyed them, please press that like button. Please do subscribe to the channel, and I will be back again for more championship predictions. So take care, guys. Have a good weekend. Goodbye.